This is Support is Sexy, episode 27, with the Other Festival and We Network founder, Dee Poku. Welcome to the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, producer, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I talk to women entrepreneurs who share their journeys and the true stories of their wins and their lessons, and give you insight and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I am so happy to have you here because you know it just would not be the same without you. So today we are welcoming Miss Dee Poku. Dee is the founder of the We Network, which is Women, Inspiration, and Enterprise. And the We Networks puts on symposiums and has been since 2010 that really brings women together, powerful women like Arianna Huffington, Diane von Furstenberg, and Rosario Dawson, who speak to the group assembled there just about their career, ambition, and sharing their wealth of knowledge with the audience. But in recent years, last year in fact, Dee went to a music festival and noticed that it was very male dominated, as they tend to be, and she created, just a year later, the Other Festival. And the Other Festival is a mixture of entertainment, artists, entrepreneurship, vendors, makers. Dee created this event for women to really come together in a new way because she saw the shift in the audience that she wanted to embrace. So looking at millennials who are much more into entrepreneurship, for example. So in this episode, Dee talks to us about her journey, but also creating events that empower women. She also speaks about when it comes to your passion, you don't have to have it all figured out, which a lot of the women have said here. The power of content and the power of partnering with cultural leaders who can influence it. Also, opportunities come to you when you are open to receiving them. She also talks about what really makes an event successful and what it takes overall to be successful. And she talks about the importance of having friends who don't judge you and who love you through the highs and the lows. So I know you're going to love this episode. Really great information in here, especially if you're someone who's thinking about hosting some kind of event of any scale that empowers women, brings women together, or people together in general. This is one you want to listen to. So without further ado, Dee Poku. So Dee, thank you so much for joining us on Support is Sexy. I'm happy to have you here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have to ask you the first question I ask everyone. When did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Gosh, I think it was after I'd been working. I mean, I'd worked for sort of big corporations from the moment I left college. And, I was very good at working for people. I was sort of a team player and, I liked the routine and I liked the safety of it. And I just sort of reached a point where I started to sort of chafe a bit. I wanted to spread my wings. I had my own ideas. And so it was a process. And I would say that the sort of eureka moment happened in Cuba, which was amazing. But I went to Cuba and there was just something about being in Cuba, the spirit of the people. I'd gone at a time when I was very, very busy at work, even though it was over Christmas. But that, I was in the movie industry then, and that's a very lucrative time. And I was trying to sort of balance, like wanting to sort of be away on vacation and then dealing with the demands of, of my job. And it was just at that point, I just thought, I'm done. Like I feel free. I feel, that this is the moment to sort of break the chain. And so it went from there.
Was it something that was always in your mind somewhere, though? I know you were very busy when you were in the industry, so maybe the film industry. So maybe it wasn't something that you could either express or explore at that time, but do you feel like it was something that was always kind of there and then that moment it really opened up for you?
I wasn't that person. I think that there are people who were sort of entrepreneurial from birth, and they take jobs and, can't really sort of deal with that environment. I wasn't really that person. Like, I was a corporate girl. Like, I was pretty comfortable in that environment and having a boss and having a team and all of the structure that came with that. So it was, it was more of a process for me where I just reached a point in my career where I wanted autonomy. I wasn't really quite sure how to express that, and it was affecting my ability to, work in a team and work in that sort of environment. So, and then once I sort of broke that chain and was no longer institutionalized, it was like, wow, like there's this incredible world out there, and I can sort of wake up and do what I want, and they're my decisions, and I live or die by them, and it's very freeing.
Yes. Now, you grew up you were born in the UK, right?
Yes.
And raised between London and Accra?
Correct.
So what was Dee like as a little girl?
A good girl.
A good girl that followed the rules.
I was a good girl who followed the rules. I had very good, very strict African parents. So, it was just the way I was brought up. I was brought up to obey orders, to do as I was told, to be polite, probably, not to take risks. So I think that, there's something in the way that I was brought up and in the structure that I grew up in that was sort of conducive to being a good corporate girl later on. And so, I was a good, kind, sweet, nerdy little girl. Yeah.
Now, do you think growing up in different parts of the world really influenced who you became and who you were and who you've become? Because you've lived in all parts of the world.
Yeah, hugely so. I mean, I really do feel like a citizen of the world. I don't feel like I'm rooted entirely in any one place, and I could happily just uproot and move somewhere else again. There's just something so wonderful about experiencing the way that other people do things and just being open to other cultures. And I think it just has contributed to my creativity and my open-mindedness. And it's, I think it's something that we should all do. In the UK, most people between college and starting their first jobs actually take a year off and go traveling, and I think that's a great thing. Mm-hmm. If you have the ability and can afford to do that.
Right. A lot of people, what do they call it now? A gap year?
A gap year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Take that year off. I think more, like you said, more and more people are doing that now.
Yeah, I think it's a great time to, also just explore who you are and what you want to do. As I said, I was, a very sort of disciplined young person, and I didn't take a gap year. Mm-hmm. But I traveled so much, it was fine. But I think that I could have benefited from just having a year off and just kind of going off and really thinking about where it was I wanted to be, because it was a very confusing time for me, that period between university and going into the workforce. I had studied math and I was going to go and work for a bank, and that just seemed like a logical conclusion. And I had to there were a few missteps before I really sort of found my calling.
Were you looking for a career sort of in the math or teaching or something like that at first, and then you knew that you didn't want to do that? Is that where the confusion came in, or what was the confusion?
I think the confusion came because when I was young, so in the UK we specialize quite early in our education. So basically from the age of 14, you start to narrow in on specific subject areas. So I happened to be reasonably good at math and sciences. And so I just got, and because I was a girl, I just got sort of channeled in that direction. It wasn't necessarily the direction I wanted to go in. I was much more interested in history and art and humanities. And I didn't really have a choice in the matter between my parents and my teachers and being obedient. I just sort of went with the flow. And so I found myself starting college with what we call A-levels, which is basically where you've honed in on your 3 subject areas. So I had A-levels in physics, chemistry, and math. And so there was nowhere else to go. Like I couldn't then go off and study something that was that was more sort of arts based. And so I went to university originally to study engineering and then segued into math. Exciting times. And so when I graduated, I felt that I didn't feel like there were many places for me to go beyond sort of working in sciences or working in finance. Okay. So it wasn't really a choice. It was just, that's where I'd been sort of backed into.
Right. It was more just that was the path that was laid ahead of you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it was really sort of once I'd left home, left university, could make my own, really felt I could make my own decisions. That was really when I started to sort of buck against the system and make my own decisions about where I wanted to be.
Now, who are some of your greatest influences growing up?
My mother was a big influence. She had so much. She had a lot of input into my life, and they were great parents and instilled a love of learning in me, a love of books, self-discipline. My mother is a nurse, and so she worked full time and then brought up 3 kids, and I'm pretty still to this day sort of impressed by how much she achieved, because I think, my sisters and I are all pretty sort of solid. So I feel like she did a great job. Outside of that, there weren't really people that I particularly looked up to. And I think it was really a time when I was living in England. There weren't really many people at the senior level, either in the media, either on television or in business. So I felt like I could really look up to who looked like me, or who I could relate to in some way. We had Margaret Thatcher. That was, I don't know that there was anyone in particular who was inspiring me at that time.
So how did, after you got into school, you end up transitioning into a career in Hollywood? Considering that's totally, well, it is more in line with what you say you were already into, but not in line with what you were doing at the time. And it wasn't like, it sounds like you weren't influenced by seeing what you saw on TV and that kind of thing. So how did you make that transition?
It's interesting. I just spoken at an event for young, so 15-year-old high schoolers, and they were all asking about how you find your passion, how do you find your calling. And I think it's a question that comes up a lot, between the ages of sort of 15 and 21, when you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to be. And my advice in that situation is always that you don't have to know. Mm-hmm. There are women in their 30s and 40s, men and women, who are still trying to figure that out. And it's just really about being open to everything that's around you, and taking risks and seizing opportunities, and just throwing yourself into things, into ideas, and not necessarily feeling like you have to sort of go down any one path. So, I was about to take a job working in corporate finance. I changed my mind and took a job in fashion. Hadn't necessarily been a passion, but it was this really sort of cool agency, and I'd been interning for them, and they offered me a job, and I took it because I just wanted to explore. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a little bit. Ultimately, it wasn't for me. But while I was working at that agency, we took on a client, a studio who had a movie about the fashion industry, and so I was working for a fashion PR agency, and we worked on that particular movie, and that's really where my love for the movie industry kind of took shape. I'd always been a movie lover. I'd never really thought that I could have a career in that industry. I didn't really know quite what I could do. And working on that movie just opened my eyes to the possibilities. I loved it so much. And so I started to look around for film jobs. And that's how I got my first job in the movie industry, working in the UK. And I started on the PR side and then transitioned into marketing.
So you were actually working in film when you were in the UK. This wasn't in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I started in the UK. And the movie industry is a pretty global industry,
Right.
and so the home of the movie industry is probably Hollywood or America. So a lot of the movies that we're consuming, a very high percentage are come out of Hollywood anyway. And so you have business relationships with Hollywood studios, with independent studios, and so you start to build those relationships, and that's really how I was offered a job here in America.
How do you feel? Well, I know some of the films you worked on were like An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's project, and several other big films. How do you feel like that experience helped you transition into doing events, which is more along the lines of the kind of things that you do now? What were some of the best experiences you got out of working with Hollywood films?
So it's such an interesting process. You start, or it starts with an idea. And it comes together. A writer gets attached, a director gets cast, the financing comes together, and suddenly there's a movie. And I was on the marketing side, and so we would sort of come in that process and start to think about how we were going to promote the movie. And so we were involved at a very early stage in thinking about the casting and the positioning, and we would start to shoot materials we might use later. And so planning an event is like planning a movie production. They're very, very similar. It's a series of building blocks that come together and sort of culminate in the all singing, all dancing, event or movie. And with movie marketing, it's almost like it's a series of events, large and small, that take place. So the production itself, is an event in itself, and then you might take it to a festival. A lot of the movies I worked on were often festival material. They were auteur-driven, intelligent, indie art house movies. And so we would showcase them at festivals. And so taking a movie to a festival is a process, going to Cannes or Toronto or Sundance. You have a series of events where you're screening the movie to the public for the first time. You have a premiere, you have press screenings, and then you have you have the international release and the domestic release, the awards campaign. Like, it's just an endless series of building blocks and small events that culminate in the release of the movie. And so you have to be efficient, you have to be able to manage budgets, you have to be able to work with personalities. And so if you can do all of those things, you can plan any event.
Right, and manage a ton of logistics, I would imagine.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and I was, my role ultimately was running international marketing for a division of Paramount. And so I was working on several territories at once. So the UK, Mexico, Portugal. So so that required a lot of planning and efficiency as well.
Now, from there, when did it occur to you that you wanted to create an event, We Network, and an organization that's all about supporting women? Was it something that occurred while you were working in the industry? Was it a passion outside of that? What was the impetus for that kind of organization?
I think within the industry, what I learned was the power of content and the power of, for cultural leaders to influence decision making and to serve as a call to action for change. So you mentioned Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. That was a perfect example of a sort of high profile leader, cultural leader in that space, and then a piece of content that came together with a movie studio to shine a light on a specific issue. And I think before that documentary, people were aware of climate change, but it wasn't really as much part of the sort of cultural zeitgeist as certainly as it is today. And I think that movie really changed hearts and minds and really sort of penetrated the public consciousness. And so those were sort of the beginnings of, my thinking on and on how you could really speak to the public and really sort of motivate the public. And then as far as working in the sort of female empowerment space, again, like, it wasn't that I'd always had this burning passion. Again, it was really about being open to the universe, opportunities coming my way. So I left my job. I started my own marketing consultancy, and I was offered a few of my early clients were nonprofits who were aware of the work I'd done on the movie side, who wanted me to work with them on campaigns and just think about how, for want of a better word, to make to create sort of sexier campaigns around very difficult issues, just to kind of get the public to take notice. And so more and more of those were sort of female-oriented projects. And so that was really the time that my eyes were really open to the issues, the social issues that women were facing. Obviously, I knew about them, but I never really processed and thought about the impact that I could have and the change that I could make. And so it was really sort of in working with those organizations early on that my mind was sort of open to this idea. And the first symposium came about because I was lucky enough to be invited to an incredible dinner that was hosted by Queen Rania and Wendy Murdoch and Indra Nooyi. And it was an incredible group of high-profile women who were there to give a voice to women who don't have one. So it was about bringing high-profile women together who collectively could make a difference for others. And it was a very inspiring environment to be surrounded by the likes of Oprah and Christy Turlington and Iman and so on. But the thing that struck us at that time was, it's amazing to be in this room, and it's amazing that these women are so focused on giving back and supporting future generations. But wouldn't it be incredible if women like us, and certainly women who are coming up, could have access to this room, could have access to the learnings and inspiration and advice from these incredible women who've achieved so much. And so that's really where that first symposium came from, was a desire to open up that room to all women and to create something that was meritocratic, that was sort of open to anyone who felt that they could benefit from being there.
And WE stands for Women, Inspiration, and Enterprise, right?
Correct, yes.
Which is exactly what it's about.
Which is exactly what it's about. I think that, men and women, as you navigate your way through the workplace, you do need constant inspiration to sort of keep going. There are setbacks, there are obstacles, things don't work out. And so you need, it's great to sort of, to get that dose of inspiration every once in a while to sort of keep you on your path. And certainly, that's what we try to offer in the programming that we provide. But more importantly, the enterprise part is like, what are the tools you need to be successful? How can you be better at what you do? What more do you need to be? What are the relationships that you need to be successful? What should you know about your industry? Can you be better at negotiating or assertiveness, or your communication skills, or social media? So we try to provide those sort of intangible learnings that help women along the way.
I think that's so important too, because a lot of events that we go to, or things that we listen to, whatever it is, it's inspiration, which is very in the moment, which is fantastic and needed. But to your point, it's about thinking, providing the tools that we use after the event. Because sometimes you leave the event and you're like, I feel great, but now what?
Absolutely. And I think, when I think about my time in working for corporations, it wasn't that I lacked, I was incredibly hardworking. There's no one who works harder than me. I'm a worker bee. And I was passionate, and I knew my job and I understood the industry. But it's more than that. Like, it takes more than that to be successful. It's almost like there are these invisible rules in the business world that can sort of trip women up. And it's really sort of understanding how to navigate your career cleverly and strategically. Those are the women and men who make it. it's not just about sort of throwing yourself in and just kind of hoping you make it. It's really about understanding how to manage relationships, both with your colleagues, with your bosses, outside of your industry. It's about how you're presenting yourself. It's about, your understanding of the sort of broader implications of what you do and how your industry functions. Those are the tools. Those are the things that are going to get you there.
And the women that you bring to these events is just a stellar list of people. I know Nancy Pelosi has been there, and as you mentioned, Christy Turlington, and just tons and Iman, tons and tons of others. Why do you think women are, well, you've been doing the event since 2010, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
Why do you think, especially now, women are showing up a lot more for each other? Why do you think that?
Yeah, why do I think that is? It's great. I think that it's an incredible time in the women's movement right now, and there are so many fantastic organizations who are working towards gender equality, and I love it. I think that, back in 2010 when We was launched, I wouldn't say that there was that same sort of energy and momentum around it.
Right.
I would say that's really started to take shape in the last couple of years. But certainly there have been women like, Diane Furstenberg and Christy have always been attuned to this, and have always been sort of giving of their time and cognizant of the issues that women face. I think, obviously we tapped into women who for whom this was important. And so I would say we try to target women, obviously, who care about these issues anyway. And we've just been lucky. I mean, some of the women who spoke at that first conference were from that dinner. And so, we just sort of use that experience wisely. And I think that once a couple of people say yes, others do because they want to be with their peers. And so, but, I've been lucky, so I'm very grateful.
Yes, you've been lucky, but you've been very good at producing these events. I've been to them, and they're phenomenal. And
Thank you.
The women that you assemble, both on stage and even within the crowd, is just a powerful group of women. So you definitely know what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
It's fantastic. Now, what are you most proud of since the launch of We in 2010?
I'm just, I get these great emails and great letters from women who have been inspired to make a change in their lives as a result of being at one of our events. And that's just all the reward I need without sounding too cheesy. But,
no, that's wonderful.
I just think that everything that I do is sort of driven and motivated by my own experiences, things I wished I'd had. And so when I hear from women who, quit their jobs and started businesses or asked for promotion or negotiated better, whatever it is, I think, that's me. That was me. And so, I'm sort of fulfilling that promise that was me once. And so, that's really what I'm proud of is the women who get something out of it and make big changes.
I love that. Now, what if there's someone out there who's listening who is younger, who might be wanting to put on an event not like this at this scale necessarily, but say she wants to do something where she helps, inspire her peers or brings in just even one guest speaker or something like that. Is there anything that you would say would be a great starting point for someone like that who maybe doesn't have the connections or that kind of thing? Because I know a lot of young women especially like to put on, it's still an event, but it might be something like a brunch or something, smaller scale. But millennials seem to really be passionate about connecting with each other.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to do it. And I mean, I went to a wonderful thing. It's called African Ladies Who Lunch or something. And they are all just, young women in their 20s. And they get together for brunch once a month. And they invite a guest speaker. And I went. And it was so wonderful. And, and obviously they reach out to African women, and I just don't see that anyone would say no to them, because it's just a great place to be in, a great environment. And, it's nothing fancy. They book a restaurant,
right,
and they all pay for their brunch, and they have a guest speaker, and that's very doable. And so, you don't have to overreach. Obviously, if you have relationships, it's all about sort of tapping into the network that you have. But you'd be surprised at who will say yes to you if you make the ask in the right way.
Right.
And so for me, it was, I wanted to speak to sort of fellow African women, young women, and it was, and I get, just as much out of it as they do. It's just a very inspiring environment to be in. So I would just say, you can start small, you can have a brunch and go somewhere that's inexpensive, get a group of your friends together, think about, there'll be somebody, someone's mom, or maybe someone's mom works for somebody, or, there's just, maybe you come to a talk like mine. And in fact, I know people who've come to my talks and then asked our speakers to speak for their events,
right.
which all power to them. So there are several ways, like go to other networking events and try and connect with people who you would like to have speak. But I think it's so much about the way you ask, and, that you can show when you reach out to a speaker that you are not just kind of throwing things against the wall just to see what sticks, but that you're actually, you've considered them, that you specifically want them. There's a reason that you want them, that there's something that they bring to the table that you admire, that inspires you. And I think put the right way, few people will say no. If they do, then they probably aren't who you wanted.
Right. I think that so many good things that you said in there. One, too, about the number of people. You'd be surprised how many people will say yes. Sometimes a lot of us, especially as women, we don't even want to ask because we've already made up the answer or the whole story in our whole head. I'm going to ask them. They're going to say no. They'll be too busy. They don't want to do it, all these things. And you'd be surprised how many people. I think most people want to say yes. If they say no, it's usually for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also, but by the way, I mean, I hear no all day long. Like right. It's not, it's
not all yeses.
Like it's definitely not all yeses. It takes a lot of no's to get to the yes.
Right.
And so just remember that. Like, don't be fazed by the no. And there are so many reasons why people say no. Often when I say no, it's because, it's just a really busy time in my life, or like there are always reasons why someone says no, and it's not personal. It's rarely personal.
Right.
So just don't take it. People have various reasons why, or they have, maybe the timing isn't good for them, or there are a myriad of reasons why. But I hear no all the time, right. And now I just go, okay, that's a no. I'll think of someone else, and it always works out. We find, and the person that says yes is always exactly who it should have been.
Right. I believe that too. It's funny, even with doing this podcast and inviting thank you for saying yes, but inviting all of the wonderful women that I've been able to talk to. And sometimes people are like, oh no, I'm, this project just started, or oh no, I'll be, it could be something simple like I'll be out of town, or some people you might not hear back from. And it even that might not be personal. They may not have seen it. They may have been very busy. So, but like you said, it always ends up being the right person. I find for me, say I'm like, I want, an African woman to be on the show to talk about her experience. And then one person you ask might not be available. Then another one shows up. Then you find out, I'm like, oh, Dee, I can talk to Dee. It always comes out somewhere if you keep your intention with what you're trying to create.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Awesome. Yeah. Don't be fazed by no. Everyone hears no. Yeah.
Yeah, don't be fazed by now. I love that. Yeah. Now, you also took the symposium to South Africa recently.
Yes, we've been to South Africa and Nigeria.
Now, why was it important for you? I know one of the things you've said is that you really wanted to change this perspective of who the African woman is.
Yeah, I spent some of my formative years in Ghana, and and I've written a blog about this, but about how important that was for me at an early age to sort of be in an environment where all of the professional people in every environment were black. So the president was black, and the lawyers were black, and the doctors are like, everybody looks like you. So then there were no barriers to success, certainly not because of your color. And I think that was very grounding for me in, in sort of my life and in my future career. Like, I don't feel like there's anything I can't achieve if I put my mind to it. And certainly, not because of the color of my skin. Not to say that racism doesn't exist, but it's not going to affect me going after, whatever it is I want to achieve. Now, I do think that there is a one-sided sort of tired view of what Africa is, to this day. And, if you go to Lagos or Cape Town or Accra, these are all bustling, thriving cities filled with modern women wearing stilettos and working at banks and, on Facebook, like, everything that we're doing, they're doing exactly the same thing. And so when all we see in the media, or the sort of majority of what we see in the media, is sort of, images of sort of poverty and war and famine, that's one side of the story, but it's not the full story. And I think it's really important to present a balanced view of what's happening on the continent. And so that was really why I was inspired to take We to Africa. And we've done 2 cities, and we want to go to Kenya next. East Africa is like the Silicon Valley of Africa, and there's so much happening. Absolutely. Oh. It's incredible innovation in the tech space. If you think about it, most Africans have come into the internet age on mobile phones, not on desktops. And so and obviously we are now in a mobile age. And so when they are designing, when they're coming up with business ideas or sort of designing apps, it's sort of instinctual to them because they've mostly, they've grown up with mobile phones. And so there are some really incredible ideas that are being generated out of East Africa. And a lot of the big tech companies have now got bases in East Africa and in South Africa. Facebook now have an office in Johannesburg. And so, it's an incredible time. And so it felt very important to me to go out there.
Are women very involved in technology there?
Yes, there are. They really are. And what's really interesting about the way women are using technology there is that they really think about how they can improve the world through innovation. And so there are some great ideas that are coming that are being generated that support agriculture or support women in rural areas who need access to information when they're pregnant. So it's really there are so many ideas, like things like M-Peso, the mobile money, and so they are ideas and technologies that support an improvement of the African way of life. And they're not just about sort of fun and games, they're about sort of supporting the infrastructure of Africa, and that's really amazing. And certainly there are women. There's an amazing woman called Oriokolo, who is based in Kenya. I think she was Google's first head of policy for Africa, or she was sort of running Google Africa for a while and now has her own startup. There is another woman whose name I'm blanking on. She's actually Isis Nyong'o, who's Lupita's cousin, who also has, there are some great women in tech. The head of Facebook Africa is a woman. There are so many.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to look them up and try to link to either their profiles or some information about them just so people can learn more about them and what they're up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. And what about for We is going to WeNetwork.com? Is that the email?
WeNetwork.org.
WeNetwork.org. I'll make sure we link to that too. Is that the best place for people to find out about future events?
Yes, for We, that, and then the other festival has its own URL.
Fantastic. So let's talk about the other festival.
Okay, sure thing.
Launched in the first one was this past June in New York.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for the other festival, and what is it?
Oh, it was amazing. It started off the idea came about because I hadn't really been on the music festival circuit for a while, and I went to a couple of festivals last year, and I was just struck by how many women were in the audience and how few women were on stage, and the lack of female headliners. So that was kind of the first sort of what's going on,
Which
moment.
was just a year ago, though. We should reiterate
Yeah.
that you did this in a year.
Yeah, this is yes. I know, I'm crazy. So that was where the sort of germ of the idea came from. But I'd also been thinking about what I could do that could support entrepreneurial women. There are so many. When we started out, I think the initial sort of wave of members came from the corporate world, so from women who were mid-career, just trying to figure out how to get into leadership. And what I've seen more and more in the last couple of years is that there's been a huge increase in the number of entrepreneurs who come to our events. So I really wanted to think about how I could support that. And a lot of these entrepreneurs were millennials. And so I wanted to create a festival that was interactive, that was experiential, where you could feel, touch, see. It wasn't about sitting in a room and just listening. It was about being a part of the experience, and where you could certainly listen to talks, but where you could also hear great music. And we had great pop-ups and lots of sort of female-owned businesses, and you could go and meet the founders and see their stuff and actually buy it, and enjoy food from female-owned chefs. And so it was just a really sort of inclusive, interactive experience, and I loved it. And it was really designed to help female makers figure out how to start and how to grow their businesses. And it was great. It was a great success. It was definitely it wasn't an easy road to get there, but we got there. And so I'm in the works for year 2. And, just armed with all the lessons and all the great feedback. So I think year 2 is going to be incredible.
I'm sure. I can't wait I missed this one, but I can't wait to go to the next one. It sounded like it, even without it, before it happened, it sounded like it was going to be amazing.
Yeah, it was just, it was so much fun. There was so much joy in the room. The energy was incredible, and it was just filled with go-getting women just connecting, and I can't begin to imagine how many deals were coming about and partnerships were being formed.
And where was it again? Was it outdoor or was it?
It was meant to be outdoor. It was meant to be in Brooklyn outdoor. And unfortunately, that venue closed down just before our event. So that was fun.
I was going to say, that sounds like fun.
And so we moved it to Spring Studios in Tribeca, which is this huge sort of multi-studio space that's used for shoots, and it's a great environment. It has high ceilings and windows, and was the next best thing
and you had
to being outdoors.
Like Naomi Campbell was there, and Justin Sky, and some other people.
Yes, we had DJs like Kitty Cash and Vashti and Chelsea Leland. We had performers like Justine Sky, and Jojo Abbott, and we had Brooke Candy. We had speakers like Naomi Campbell and Rosario Dawson and Selby Drummond, and it was a really interesting
mix of people.
Yeah, it was a really interesting mix of creatives and doers and thinkers coming together. It was very potent.
Now, how important is it to be able to, as you did, consider this is a new audience or a new group of women who need this kind of information or content, but this is a different way of engaging them?
It was definitely a new audience. It was fascinating to me because I was like, wow, who are these amazing women? They were something else, just cool. And by cool, I mean just, creative, just these sort of interesting, innovative thinkers. And they came from all over, from the all the 5 boroughs. It wasn't as Manhattan centric or as Brooklyn centric as my other events can be. They came from all over New York, and some from outside. it was definitely, they were different for sure. And then as far as the environment, again, it was less about sitting in a room, and it was more about kind of being a part of the event, that it was a festival where you could sort of, touch things and listen to things and enjoy things in a different way. But you could walk around and sort of experience things in different ways. We had art, some incredible female artists. So it was just a much more interactive experience. And I think that was important for this audience and also for what we were trying to achieve. Definitely the element that worked the best was, we created this thing called the Smart Shops, and it was basically a place for female entrepreneurs to set up pop-up shops and showcase their products. And that ranged from high fashion to chocolates, to bags, to health drinks, just an incredible array. And we curated them, so everything was, these were all amazing products that we had all we'd vetted.
It wasn't just people who just paid for a booth and then you let them set up there.
No, so the quality was high, and more importantly, you could meet the founders. So it was it wasn't just that you had to sit in a room and sort of hear people talk at you from a stage. You could actually also go. So Rosario Dawson has a fashion line called Studio 189, and she had a pop-up at the space. So you could listen to her talk, but then you could also go to her pop-up and see her stuff. And so you could sort of see the vision and experience the vision and touch the vision. So it was just a much more immersive experience.
I love that. Can't wait until next year.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
So the website for that, I'm going to have links to all of this and the other things you mentioned. So what's the website for that? Is it
it's theotherfestival.co.
Otherfestival.co. Fantastic. Now, are you going to, do you envision continuing to do to do the Other Festival, or focusing more on the Other Festival to cultivate this new audience now?
Yes, well, that's definitely something I've been mulling over, through the summer. There's a need for both. I think that the biggest symposium is on hold for the moment, because what I'm finding is that these smaller, we call them after work, these sort of smaller after work events that we host sort of once or twice monthly, people have been very receptive to them, because it's a more intimate environment. So rather than having sort of 500 women, it's a space where, there are 100 women, or, and so it's easier to meet everybody. It's a more relaxed environment. You get to have some one-on-one time with the speaker. And so I think that women are, just sort of craving that sort of ability to connect with one another. And so I'm really honing in on that and wanting to expand those outside of New York. And then the festival, it was so potent. It was such a dream that, that's something I really want to focus on as a sort of bigger tentpole event.
I love that. And let me know if there's anything I can do to support you. That's what we're all about around here, of course.
Absolutely.
Anything at all. Now, having both of these events and all of the things that you're doing, how do you balance? Is there such a thing as balance? Everything, family life, the business, the events, all the things that you're doing. Where does Dee fit in?
I don't know. I don't know that Dee gets to fit in at the moment. But, right now things are a little bit quieter. So it's a great time to spend quality time with my family. There are times when that's not possible. So in the 2 to 3 month lead up to the festival, it was crazy. I was working every hour, and you can't devote the same amount of time to your family as you would like. And that's life. That's just the way it is. But in general, I try to. I'm a planner and a list maker, and so I like to carve out times, and it helps me focus and sort of keep my life on track. So, I'll say, mornings between these hours of family time, like first thing in the morning, I want to spend time with my son. So I don't like to do breakfast meetings, before I go to work. And in the evening between 5 and 7, that's when, he has his dinner and bath time and story time. And that's a really important time. And so, it's not always possible, but I try and sort of carve out those two portions of the week. And that's his time. And so you just try and, for me, I find that building in routine works for me. I mean, everyone has their method. But it just, for me, then it allows me to kind of carry on with the rest of my day without sort of worrying about having to be somewhere, or because I know that these are the moments that I've carved out to be with my family, and those are sacrosanct. So.
Right. And now you've also talked about going on hikes with a friend, where you
Oh,
discuss
yes.
your 3 areas that you guys discuss: your personal, lifestyle, and career. How important are those hikes for you, and how important is it for women in general to create spaces where they can be honest with each other, brutally honest if necessary? I have friends who are like that, too brutal sometimes, but brutally honest with you, and that we can get feedback.
I think it's so important. I mean, I live for those hikes. So, I have a great friend, a very close friend, and we started them when I lived in LA. They literally were hikes. I lived in LA, and she would come out and visit, and we would go for a hike. And it started organically. It wasn't a planned thing, but we just start, catching up because we hadn't seen each other in a while. So we would just kind of run through everything that was going on. And then we just found them so helpful and so enriching that they became more structured, and we would plan them out. And so here they're more sort of power walks, because there's no hiking on the streets of New York. And we use that time to talk about personal and career and sort of family, and to share, where we're at, the good and the bad, and to get feedback. And I think that we know each other so well that nothing's off limits, and no advice would be taken in the wrong way. So we can be brutally honest and accept it, and because I know it's truly coming from the right place, and I know that I can be as honest about everything, the lows and the highs, and know that I won't be judged, and that she won't, see me differently, or like me any less because I failed at something or I messed something up. And I think it's really important to have people in your life like that you can turn to for, in good times and bad, for, when there's a crisis, and also when wonderful things happen.
Right.
And I think we all need that, whether it's about creating, what I'm seeing right now is people creating these little mini networks. I'm actually part of this group called Verve. And it's a group for working mothers. And there are only, there's like 20 of us. But we just kind of get together and just talk about, figuring it out. I think the last conversation was about, getting husbands to do the housework without it turning into a fight.
Right. That's a very strategic meeting. Or it's about kind of taking your kids on a business trip, or, just stuff that comes up, and it's about sort of peer-to-peer advice and feedback. And, and there's just no better advice than, someone having figured something out that you're grappling with yourself. Right. So there are these great sort of aha moments, like, oh my God, that's such a great way of doing that. Thank you. I'll apply that to my own life. So and you can't get that when you're not when you don't surround yourself with people who are in the same sort of, not exactly the same situation, but a similar experience or dealing with a similar thing. So as you have your friend that you go on your hikes or your walks with, but then you have this group of working moms who have the the same parameters of an experience that you have, even though they're doing it differently. So I always try to advocate for people, especially women, to do that. Like, these could be your people who talk about the career. These could be the people who are very much about this other thing, to make sure you surround yourself with that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think sometimes, I mean, obviously I have friends who don't have kids, and they don't want to hear about, my kids' stuff. It's boring to them, so I'm just not going to bore them with it. And then there are some who could talk about, kindergarten applications all day long, which I've done with a mother, and so, so you have to sort of think about, who you're addressing what issue with.
Exactly. So now, what's the greatest lesson having a business has taught you about yourself as a woman?
It's made me so much more resilient than I thought I ever could be. I like to tell the story of when I left the corporate world to start a business and how tough that transition was. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't realized then how much my identity was sort of bound up in my job and the prestige of working for a certain type of company. Mm-hmm. So I was so used to saying I'm Dee from blah. And suddenly when I wasn't, I didn't know who I was. It was a very strange thing I hadn't anticipated. I'd lost, my identity. I didn't, it was a very sort of vulnerable and insecure time for me. And so now I just know that, just nothing can knock me because I've built something that was, I built something myself that no one can take away from me because it's mine. Mm-hmm. And I can do it anywhere and under any circumstance. And there's something very liberating and strengthening about that, when you're your own boss and you have your feet firmly planted and it's just all about you. You are your business. And so it's just given me a confidence and a resilience that is invaluable. And I'm so thankful for that.
That's something that I always try to remind people of too. Your title or different things might be taken away from you, but your experience is something that is yours and yours alone. No one can take that away from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in wrapping up, I thank you so much for your time, and please thank your son. We took mommy away from him for a little while. I just have a couple.
He was under strict instructions, and of course, to be honest, I shouldn't have said anything, and he wouldn't have been bothered.
Right.
But he's always very curious about, mommy's meetings.
Right.
So
that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So if you think over your life and your career and you had a chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
So it would be Elayne, the woman I mentioned who I go on my hikes with. Because she's been there for me. We've known each other for so long, since we were in our early 20s to now. We've been through so much together and been crazy together and, done stupid things and great things. And I would thank her for being there during the bad times, because that's a measure of a friendship. Is the person who has your back when it feels like everything is falling apart. Mm-hmm. And God, I'm feeling a bit emotional.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
There've been many others. So if there's anybody else that there have been, I would say there have been so many women who've supported me over the years, but certainly she's the one sort of consistent presence in my life. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
So final question for you. How can we support you? I'll have the links to the websites and the things that we mentioned, but is there anything else coming up next that you want people to know about, be on the lookout for? How can we support you?
So our next talk is on the 17th of August. I'm not sure when this airs. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next talk is on the 17th of August. It's with a woman called Ty Staclorius. Sorry, it's a tricky name. Ty Staclorius. And she's a manager, so she manages artists and business people, executives. So she has people like John Legend as clients. And we're talking about personal branding, and which is so crucial to career progression right now. Is thinking about how you present yourself, how you position yourself in the workplace. If as an entrepreneur, how you think about your brand, whether it's through social media or your brand identity. So, just as ambitious working women, you have to think about the woman you are presenting to the world. Your personal brand is everything. So that's what we'll be exploring during that talk. So,
and we can find out about that on wenetwork.org.
Yes, or you can get tickets. The URL is brandwe.eventbrite.com.
Brand, W-I-E.
Yes,
Okay.
.eventbrite.com, and we'd be happy to give a discount to your listeners.
Oh, that would be lovely. Can
Yes,
support is sexy be the discount code?
absolutely, done.
Great. I'll
So
be sure to
yeah,
link to that. Fantastic.
okay,
Thank you. We
sure
appreciate that.
thing.
So before you go, what's a parting piece of advice you have for us?
My advice would be, because we've talked about this a lot here, is don't underestimate the power of your network. Something I love to say. I think that everything I've achieved in my life has been through my network of friends and colleagues and supporters. I wouldn't have anything without them. And, when you are starting out in your career, it's easy to sort of forget and be sort of transient in your friendships and in your relationships. But it's really important to keep people close and to build a great network around you, build a great professional network around you. Because these relationships become more and more important, the further you all rise up the career ladder. All the jobs I've had have been through people recommending me. And I think once you once you're sort of mid-career and the stakes get higher and it gets tougher for women, those relationships will become more important than ever. So don't underestimate that.
I love that. Dee, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. This has
Pleasure.
been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Hold on just
Thank
one
you.
second.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to that episode of the Support is Sexy podcast. And I do hope that you got some inspiration from it. And the challenge is for you to do at least one thing. Take one thing from the episode, at least one thing. You can always do more, but at least one thing that will help you move one step closer to your dream. Whether that's launching a business, writing a book, whatever that thing is that you want to do, take something from this episode and move one step closer. And what I'll also ask of you, if you can tell me what you think about the episodes, what we've been doing, what you want to hear, what you like, what you experience while you're listening, go over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let me know what's going on. What are you thinking? What are you feeling about the show? What else can I do to be of service to you, which is what this is all about, to be of support to you. That's our buzzword, right? You can also go to my website, elaynefluker.com/podcast. So that's ELAYNEFLUKER.com/podcast. Hear more episodes there. Also have a bunch of great videos, tons of information. It's where I'm going to be spending a lot of time, and it's where I love to connect with you. So again, thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your support. And the most important thing I want you to remember is having it all does not mean doing it all alone. So now, go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.